How many of you guys grew up in a household that had rules? Anybody? Anybody? How many of you guys grew up in a household with no rules? That explains a lot. Okay, now I'm starting to get it, some of you. Okay, that makes sense. So we probably had rules, and some of those rules may have been founded in the Bible. Maybe some of them were found in culture, and maybe some of them were just made up on the whim of your parents. How many of you parents felt like you just made up all these rules and have no clue what the heck you're doing? Anybody? I went through. Did we all feel like that? You're like, I don't know. And they're like, why do we have that rule? I don't know. I needed a rule, so I made up a rule, right? That's what we do. We just make up rules randomly and we see what sticks. That's what we do as a culture, right? We talked about the last time that we're like our God, that he's creative, right? So we create things, and that he is fruitful and multiplies his creation. So we're fruitful and we multiply, and so that's what we do. And then he makes things and then makes up rules to them, right? I mean, he made the garden and he made the trees and they made up rules which trees you could have, and so we like to make up rules. That's what we do, right? We make up rules. In fact, in the Bible, if you don't know this, God told Adam to eat the tree of the knowledge of good and evil or not eat the tree. So he made up a rule, right? There was the first rule. And the second rule, do you guys know what the second rule of creation was? It was where Adam went back to Eve and said, don't eat the tree or touch it, or you'll die. So Adam said, oh, God makes up rules. I should make up some rules. So he made up his own rule on top of God's rule, right? He added to the rule, right? And we do that at church all the time, right? You come in here and we have leadership rules and we have stuff rules, right? So we are made like our God. We like to make up rules. So I don't know how your household was when you were a kid growing up on rules. So I want to talk a little bit today about the difference between different types of rules. And today my message is entitled, Rooted in Relationship. Okay, so we're talking about the rules of relationship and how relationship applies to each of us. So there are two different categories of rules that you would say kind of fit our society, okay? And the first one would be family rules. Say family. Okay, family rules are not to get in. They are there because you are already in, right? You're born into a family. You don't get into a family, right? You don't follow rules in a family to get into the family. Would you say that's accurate? That makes sense? You're not trying to get into the family. You're already in the family. Now, once you're in the family, there's a series of rules that work in a household dynamic. For instance, your parents may have different rules, right? Your parents, when you're a kid, or maybe your kids, you have a rule that says you have to make your bed every morning, right? Any kids in here, their parents have the make your bed every day rule? Anybody? We've mostly abandoned that as a society. I see that right now, right? That happened. Any of you adults, your parents had that rule. Okay, see, look around, kids. Stop giving your parents a hard time. They're nicer than their parents, okay? Seriously. This is why our kids are being ruined in society. They need to learn to make their bed. You made your bed, now lie in it, right? Oh. So we have different rules, and different families have different rules. Any of you guys have the rule where you have to eat together? Like you have dinner together? Anybody do that? Every night you have dinner together? My family didn't really have that. My rule was see what food you can get and run away and hide and eat it before anybody else notices you took food. Right? I think Rachel, my wife, that was hers. Like her, most of our marriage, when we were first married, if I have the rule in my household that if I make her something, I have to make sure it's acceptable. So you have to have one bite out of it to ensure proper, peanut butter to jelly ratio. You don't want to go over or under. That would be a travesty. So I'd always make her a sandwich and bring it to her, and there'd always be like the perfect cartoon one bite out of it, I took a good, clean, perfect, round-shaped bite. I got a good, so it looked pretty. And so that was the rule of our household. So I don't know what your rule is. And hers was similar to mine growing up. You fought for your food with her sisters. They had plenty, but they would just fight. It was like somebody would want to take all of it, right? I mean, I don't know if that's your Thanksgiving tradition, right? And so like most families, they have the rule, like somebody would make the best dish. Like, I don't know if you have a favorite Thanksgiving one, but that was everyone's favorite. And the person that brought it always brought a little one, right? You ever had that happen? And so everyone's like, no, mine. You start having like a fist fight. In my house, we settled all disputes. Our rule was my kids never really fist fought. They've never been I have 3 teenagers that have never like duked it out. Right? They kind of pushed each other once or twice, not really, but they've never duked it out because we had a rule in my house. Playtime was MMA mats. They fought. And so when they got mad at each other as they were growing up and they were little, it was always, they get mad. They call each other a name or two. And then, you wonder if they're going to fight. You're like, you want to fight? No, I'm not playing with you. I'm mad. So fighting was like playtime to them. It was a reward. So it worked out well for my family. Okay. And so you may have different rules. Maybe you had some crazy. Anybody have any crazy rules, like weird rules that you grew up with that were just hilarious? Anybody? You guys are boring. What? What was it? Women's group has a fight over dessert. Oh, over Renee's dessert in particular. Banana pudding. So if Renee makes banana pudding, there is an all-out fight. So the rule in women's group is gloves for banana pudding, throw down, right? Rachel, what? And tells you it's gone? Check. There we go. Yeah, don't do that again. Wrong mute. So he's back there going, oh, sorry. He's like, sermon over. They're going home early today. I don't want him. I'm off camera. Forget you all. He's gone. No, you don't move the camera. I'm moving back. All right. You can still see my shadow. That's all you get. Dust. Yeah, whatever. Whatever. I was going to radically change your lives, but now I'm not going to. All right, fine. I'll change your life, so maybe you'll be nicer next week. All right, so maybe you have family rules, okay? So you got different family rules. But family rules, all those rules are meant to secure the safety of the family, right? The health of the family, the joy of the family, the peace of the family. None of those rules are there to get you into the family, right? If you break a rule, right, if you didn't make your bed or you didn't fight your brother on the MMA mat when you got home, or you didn't do your chores or whatever it is that your rule was in your home, didn't mean you were now excommunicated from the family, right? Okay, you were not kicked out of family. Now, you can go later on in life where rules start to matter a little bit more, but when you were a kid, those didn't get you kicked out of the family. They didn't determine whether you were in or out of the family. They were just there to to ensure that the family was healthy, right? Okay, so that's family rules. So on the other side, we got what's called club rules. Say club. And that's not the big stick you hit people with when they break your rules. Different club. Right, and it's not the party rules. It's not the rules of party, right? Party all day. Nope, that's not what it is. All right, so club rules are the idea that an organization, clubs say that you agree to keep these rules in order to get in and remain in. Let me say that again. Club rules are say you agree to keep their rules in order to get in and remain in. In a club rule, in an organizational rule, if you want to join the country club, if you want to join the Rotary Club, if you want to join a sports team or do any of these things, they have a set of rules that says these are the criteria for being a part of our organization if you want to get in, and this is what we expect of you if you want to remain in, right? If you break the rules of a club or an organizational rule setting, then you are out, correct? Right? You get kicked out of that organization. You no longer are allowed into that organization, right? Any of you guys been kicked out of a club before? I'm not going to ask you why. Not the party club, okay? Just an organization. Everybody been kicked out of those? All right? Anybody been fired from a job because you didn't follow the rules of that club or organization? I've been fired from a job, right? All right, yeah. So really like two of you, the rest of you are like, I'm not telling them I'm not perfect. I've been fired from a job. How many of you guys been fired from a job before? Come on. So you understand club rules. Thank you. You understand club rules, right? So if you don't follow the rules, you get out. Now, I've heard it said a lot of times that the Old Testament to the New Testament relates a lot to these kind of rules, all right? And that the Old Testament is more of a club relationship, and the New Testament is more of a family relationship, right? The New Covenant gives us a family relationship. There are rules, but it's not about whether you're in or you're out. Okay, you are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. You are redeemed by Jesus, and He forgives you through grace, not through works, not through whether you obey the rules, but through grace. So it's more of a family thing. We follow the rules to have peace and health in our life and our relationships and what's happening around us, not so that we're actually in the family. Does that make sense? So a lot of people will say to you that the Old Testament is more of a club relationship. You had to follow the rules or you were out. You were in or you were out. And so that's kind of the way that people had to do that. You had to keep the rules to stay in relationship with God in the Old Testament. So things like, maybe you heard things, if you've been in church for a long time, you might have heard things like God can't be around sin. You ever heard that one? Anybody? God can't be around sin. He couldn't, or maybe you heard this one. God couldn't speak to people in the New Testament because we were fallen and sinful, so he had to use rules to establish a relationship. You ever heard that one before? You had to have rules. Nobody's ever heard that one before? So you had to have rules. I can see you guys if you didn't know. So you had to have rules to establish a relationship. Or perhaps you understood that God only really spoke to one person at one time. He just picked a prophet in order to speak to. He found somebody that was holy or righteous or usable, so he could speak to the whole nation through that one person because he couldn't speak to everyone because of sin. You ever heard that one? Does that make sense? The Isaiah, prophets like Isaiah and all the other ones. You've heard that. So the idea is that we got different types of rule establishment throughout the Bible. Except I haven't that's kind of, to me, is like this paradox, where it like sucks the universe up and destroys it all at once because the paradox. God says that he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. But here we have two different types of relationship rules laid down from the God that's exactly the same. So my question today would be, as we're looking at this, let's see if we can establish really once and for all what type of rule, relationship we are in with God, and see how that applies to our relationships here on earth. So Adam and Eve fell from grace. Everyone knows that, right? They ate the fruit, right? Okay? And they fell from grace. So if you remember the story of Adam and Eve, so a lot of people will say God didn't talk to people when they were in sin, right? He just had to use a prophet. And so God didn't really talk to people. And so let's examine if that's true. I'm not going to go through the scripture. You can read it on your own in Genesis chapter 2 when man fell from grace. But he falls from grace, and God comes down in the cool of evening to find man. They've now made themselves fig leaves and covered themselves up. And God comes down and he says, Adam, where are you? So they've fallen from grace, right? God is not ignorant. He knows they've fallen from grace. So did he talk to him? He had a, right? And so he found them and he said, what happened? And so Adam says, well, my woman gave me fruit to eat, and I was really hungry, and I didn't know, right? Because she cut it all up and made an apple pie. I didn't realize it was the fruit, and that's how it happened. And so Adam explains that it's the woman's fault, and then God asks the woman, well, what happened? And the woman says, the serpent deceived me, and God punishes the serpent. And then after he's done punishing the serpent, he lets man and woman know what the consequences are to their sin. And then he decides how to protect them by casting them out of the garden before they eat the tree of life. And so he says, don't eat the tree of life, because then they'll live forever in their sin. And then he makes them some clothes. Did you know that? He actually takes and makes animal skins. He kills an animal and makes skins out of it to clothe them and covers them. So man falls from grace and is now covered in sin, and God has a conversation with them and gives them a present. Right? Doesn't sound that wrathful, does it? So we get this concept of this wrathful, mean God in the Old Testament, right? How many of you guys grew up thinking that? We got this wrathful God of the Old Testament and this loving God of the New Testament. These are two different gods. And while God is a God of justice, okay, a lot of times we miss the mercy that's always been there. So when Adam falls, the first thing God does is make some clothes. So there's punishment for it, but his heart is clothing them and trying to keep them from living in sin forever. And even when Cain falls, right? Cain kills his brother Abel, and does God kill Cain? So the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth of the Old Testament, that concept, does God uphold that in the very beginning? Right? No, he doesn't. He actually says, no one will kill you. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to put a mark on you. No one's going to kill. I'm not happy with what you've done. There is a serious consequence for what you've done, but I'm going to have mercy. So if you look at the very beginning of the whole Bible, there's this trend of mercy from the beginning. And only as man gets more and more corrupt by sin does God have to make harder and harder consequences. And if you look at it and you follow the story, you will see that God is continually starting with mercy and ending with mercy and trying some other stuff in the middle, like all of us parents have done, right? Right? God knows what he's doing. We're just trying to figure it out. But you ever tried that? Try and being easy at first, and then your kids continue, and so you have to get a little stricter. And then one day they finally get it, and you can just go back to easy, right? It does. It does happen. Not at your age. Not at your kids' age, but it will happen eventually. You'll have teenagers that all you have to do is fight with them about mowing the lawn. Seriously. And it gets a little easier. So hopefully it gets a little easier. If you did it right, it gets a little easier. No, and that's not totally true, but sometimes it's not your fault. And sometimes it really is your fault. So the idea, so God talks to them the whole time. So I'm going to read you something from Exodus, but I'm going to skip to the end. I want to start at the end of it, the last couple verses, starting with when the people. I believe it's probably 19 or 20. When the people saw the thunder, and so we're Exodus 20, excuse me, if you're following along. Exodus 20 should be 19-ish. I'm not 100% sure. I'm kind of skipping. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. This is the time when God laid down the Ten Commandments, okay? So the whole nation of Israel is gathered there for the Ten Commandments. So the people seeing this thunder and lightning, and it says they stayed at a distance and said to Moses, the people of Israel said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. Now, did God say, "I will never talk to my people" in that? Or was God trying to talk to his people and the people said, "No, we don't like that. That's scary." Right? You ever had an experience with God and the first experience you had with God was a little scary? I hear that all the time at this church, okay? I hear people say, "Oh, I don't know about that. That was scary. That was weird. That was different," okay? And so here's God coming down in a thick smoke, ready to talk to his nation, ready to lay down his covenant with the nation. And the nation says, "We'll just hear it from you, Moses, because that's scary. You go over there. You go," right? And you've seen The Sandlot, right? "You jump over the wall and get the baseball. We'll stay over here," okay? You go take all the risk. You go get burned, all right? We'll just do this. So God's longing was to talk to his people, and his people said, "No, we prefer an advocate. We prefer for you to give the word. You speak to one person and let them talk on your behalf." And so started prophets. Okay? And that's where it began, where man rejected the voice of God once and for all. So there's not really this concept that God did not talk to his people, or he didn't have a desire to talk to his people. He's always wanted to be in relationship. Whether there was sin or whether there was a new covenant, he's always wanted to have a conversation with his kids. Whether it's a punishment conversation or a loving conversation, that's always been his desire. So we see that is that God is not the same, this picture that we've painted in the Old Testament of this mean God who can't be around us because we're just awful people and we're just awful sinners. And yes, we had sin, and yes, there was a new covenant, all those things, but it was never what he wanted to do. All right? In fact, what he did was he laid down the rules of the relationship, the covenant relationship. And I think this is interesting, and it'll give you some insight to who God is. We know today as the Ten Commandments, right? And so I'm going to run through them. You'll have them on the screen there. And if you're reading along, that's in Exodus 20, starting with verse 2. And it says this. I'm just going to kind of paraphrase really quickly. "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me." Number 2 is you shall not make for yourself any image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I am the Lord your God, and I am jealous God. And 3 is, the next one, you shall not misuse the name of your Lord, your God. As you know, don't take the Lord's name in vain. The next one, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. The next one, honor your father and your mother. The next one, you shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. Some of you are like, "Oh, no." You shall not give false testimony, lie against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, or his servants, or his donkeys, or anything else belonging to your neighbor. Okay? So those are the 10 commandments. Those, when God got together and said, "I am going to make a people. I am going to have a relationship with those people. I am going to enter into covenant with those people. I need a set of rules in order to have a relationship, to establish a firm foundation so this relationship can move forward and I can eventually bring Jesus, who will be the redemption of the world and restore what was taken in the garden originally during the first fall." It started with the 10 commandments. That was the first set of rules. So somewhere in here is a concept and a theory of what God was trying to say. But here's what's interesting about the 10 Commandments. Are the 10 Commandments all about God's relationship to man and the restoration of it? Is it? I just read it to you. The first one, I am the Lord your God. Who's that about? My relationship to who? God, right? Your relationship to God. You shall have no other gods before me. Your relationship to who? God. So you see in the very beginning, your relationship to God is the first priority. It is the most important thing. You shall not take the Lord's name in vain. That's your relationship to. You shall remember the Sabbath. That's your relationship to. Right? So we have 4 now. 4 of the first commandments are about your relationship to God. All right? Now let's look at the rest of them. You shall not murder. Is that your relationship to God or your relationship to each other? So that's this way, right? We got this way and that way, which makes a cross. Oh. Okay? So our relationship here and our relationship to there matters. You shall not murder. That's a relationship to each other. You shall not commit adultery. God or us? Us. You shall not steal. Us. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Us. You shall not covet your neighbor's stuff. Us. So let's see. Murder, adultery, stealing, false testimony, shall not covet. Oh, honor your mother and your father. Us. 6. Let's see. What's half of 10? Anybody? Very good. Okay, you guys are good. Yeah. All right. Math geniuses up in here. All right, so 5. Yet in God's original establishment of a covenant to restore relationship, 6 of the 10 are about us to each other. That's it. Almost now God's first, right? And he listed his first, and then the rest, 6 of them were about us. Do you think that God thought our relationship to each other somehow affected his relationship to us? That there was something powerful about the way we treat each other, about the relationship that we are in with each other that affects our relationship with him. Do you see that? And so how we interact with each other, our interactions with each other, matter greatly to how well rooted we are. Our relationships with each other are a deep, deep root that goes down, that holds us together in times of great difficulty. And even God understood that if I want a relationship with these people, then I need to teach them how to relate to one another. They need to branch out, and their vines need to interconnect. Their root systems need to interconnect so they can be stronger and they can be stable for me. How many guys have ever been through a dark moment and it was somebody else that encouraged you, that kind of pulled you out of that moment? Anybody? Another human being. God knows that he needs helpers, not just Santa Claus, right? Santa Claus is not the only one that needs a helper. God knows that you, in relationship with one another and with him, are more powerful than alone. Because when we get discouraged, we pull back. And God wants as many people loving you until you're sick of it in the face as often as possible when you are hurting. So the people completely decided we don't want to hear the voice of God, but God understood that the relationship to man mattered very much. So Jesus is the standard. When we're looking at our lives and relationships and how to behave and act, Jesus is the model, right? Jesus, would you agree with me that Jesus is the standard, right? We should look at Jesus, and if Jesus behaved a certain way, we should probably behave that way. It's not rocket science to figure that out. It's not rocket science. So here's the reality. Our relationships to each other very much matter. So if Jesus is the standard, we want to look at Jesus' relationships as the standard. So let's examine Jesus' relationships as a standard for how we should behave in relationships. So when I look at the life of Jesus, I realize that Jesus had how many disciples? Anybody know? Anybody else? Someone other than 12? How many disciples did he have? It's a trick question. He had over 100 disciples. Okay? Jesus had over 100 disciples. How many really close to him disciples? 12. Okay, so he had 12 that were his core leadership group, the core 12. But out of his other disciples, he picked a key disciple or the key disciples out of that. And out of those 12, do you know how many he had like really, really, really tight, close, personal? 3, okay? So Jesus could only handle 12 people all the time on an intimate level, okay? He could teach and be around over a little over 100, okay, 120-ish, 100 something there. But he could only really just like get and pour into 12 people continually, and only just really go to the deepest level with 3. So a lot of times what we try to do, so our basis, what we have right here in this room is actually a pretty good example of what Jesus would have taught. Okay, so you would be the disciples, okay? And so I'm discipling you. I'm modeling after what Jesus taught me to do. So I can disciple this many people comfortably by myself and teach you. But there's only about 12. So only about the front row here could I be able to, the seats in the front row, could I be able to really dig into. And only this side over here, these couple, would be the only ones that I could really just spend all of my time with. That's all I'm capable of, because I'm not Jesus. I'm not Jesus, and I probably can't do better than him. Does that make sense? Everybody follow me so far? This is a practical message, but it is powerful, guys. So when looking at that relationship, that's my relationship standard. So if I want to change the world, if I want to have value and meaning, I'm not sure why this keeps cutting out. I might switch to the wireless. If I want my life to have value and meaning and purpose, and for whatever I'm trying to establish to go beyond my life, then I need to find 12 people I can really pour into. I need to have a group that's solid, that's about 12 people, and I need to get those 12 people to have a relationship with each other in order to help them maintain their relationship. Right? Because if I withdraw, if something happens to me and I pull out of the group, those 12 should be so ingrained in what I've discipled and what I've poured into them that they should be able to then encourage one another and push past that. So when Jesus left, those 12 and the other 120 or so were able to then spread the gospel, right? They were able to then change the whole world because they were able to encourage one another. It says after Jesus left that they met in houses daily. They met together daily and encouraged, broke bread together, trained in the word. Like they spent time with God together. So there's a moment where your faith goes from just listening to pastor on a Sunday morning, to be involved in a group of people where you can encourage, break bread together, and grow together. Do you see that? And that's the important thing. If Jesus is going to be the standard, that's what we have to do. So Jesus poured his life into people. He loved people, regardless of what those people were, right? He picked people that were awesome people, and he picked fishermen, and he picked tax collectors, okay? He picked people that nobody else wanted and put them in his group, right? How many of you guys understand that sometimes you're going to pick people that everyone else says don't pick that person, right? You're going to have people in your lives that everyone says that's a dangerous person to pick, right? And so you're going to love and encourage people that other people might have rejected. And we need to be kinds of people. So you're going to pick and encourage other people, all right? And then in those relationships, here's the thing. Here's the reason why most people don't want to be in relationships. Most people don't want to be in a relationship because if you are close to people, it will hurt you. Come on. Somebody needs to shout me down with that one, right? They will hurt you. Has anybody in here ever been hurt by someone? I'm going to ask you a harder question. Has anybody in here ever hurt anybody? Come on, we've all done it. We've all messed up. We've all been messed on, okay? We've all had it happen. And when you get into relationships equal messy. They equal hurt. They equal pain. And they equal joy. And they equal love. Somebody asked me the other day, it's like, why, I don't even feel like getting close to them. I don't even feel like getting close to people if they're just going to leave or hurt me or whatever. And I told them, I said, yeah, but if we never allow ourselves to get close to them, we never get the opportunity to have a win. We never get the opportunity to have love. We never get the opportunity to experience what it's like to be in relationship with someone so that our faith can grow. We never, ever get the opportunity for one out of those 100. Here's the thing. How many people followed Jesus? Thousands of people showed up for his message, right? Only 120 people showed up to the upper room. Very few people showed up. Only 12 really were that stuck closer than a brother. And even then, they frustrate him, right? He'd be praying and they'd fall asleep, right? He couldn't really count on them, right? They'd argue amongst themselves. He couldn't really count on them. And they would disappoint him from time to time. Relationships are messy. And so Jesus couldn't even keep those relationships together. But he understood that if he was going to accomplish what he was meant to accomplish, he needed those relationships. Those relationships were crucial to having God take the world over and restore it. Your relationships in your life will determine whether or not your assignment here on earth, whether you are supposed to fulfill something, ever gets accomplished. Yes, people will hurt you, but you will live a void and an empty and unfulfilled life unless you surround yourself with people you are called to click with and fulfill what God has called you to. You will never live up to your calling alone. God does not call people to do it alone. It's not the way it works. So here's the thing. Will you get hurt if you get into relationships with people? Yes. Will you have the opportunity to live a fulfilled life with relationships with people? Yes. Could you save yourself from getting hurt if you recluse yourself and stay by yourself? Yes. Yeah, you can keep yourself. I mean, you'll hurt yourself, right? Then you just got to listen to your own self, and that's worse sometimes, right? You know what's in your own head. You're a mess. Come on, right? You don't want anybody to play back all your thoughts on repeat, right? Come on. You broadcast your thoughts, all of you are hiding under a rock forever, all right? Me too. You're like, oh, no. It's a great story. And you're like, oh, shoot me now. Somebody call my phone, right? I heard that, right? So, yeah, try saying every one of your thoughts out loud for like 3 days. Tell me how that works out for you. And then tell me if you would ever hurt yourself, okay? Just not true. Side note, all right? So you will never live out the calling. You will never live up to the standard. You will never live the legacy life that is inside of you to live, that God has called you to, if you are not in relationship with other people. That's why you're not supposed to murder or steal from them or hurt them or do things. That's why God said, here's all the rules, because I need in relationship and not separate out of relationship. But if you steal from them, can you imagine? I just want to be there on the mountain. You know, like I'm that guy. I'm a Jew, so maybe it just runs in our Jew heritage. But like when Moses came down that mountain, he's like, all right, the Lord of all creation, the wisest of the wise, he has the rules for life. Let me tell you what they are. I don't know if this is just leaves. Let me tell you what they are. Don't steal. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. Here you go. Oh, that's okay. I took your thing the other day, too. Here's your cup back. Oh, I didn't know. It's okay. We didn't know. You didn't know to take other people's stuff? That would have been me. I'd be like, oh, so profound, God. That's great. What's the next one? Don't kill people. Oh, I messed up. Really? So I'm that ornery guy that me and God have to work on a relationship, right? But he understood the idea of the Ten Commandments is anything that separates you from right relationship with somebody is probably a don't do, okay? Unless you are separating yourself to God, then the separation between us is not valid, okay? It's just not. Okay, but here's the thing. So if you do everything right, if you live like Jesus and you are perfect, you should have less relationship hurts, right? Yeah, right? We should have some less, right? Will you have zero? No. So if Jesus is the standard, you ready for this? If Jesus is the standard, then we need to look at Jesus' life to see how relationships really work. Here's the idea. If you are kind, loving, and wonderful, you should have less pain in your life from people hurting you or you hurting people. That's true. But even if you do it perfect, even if you do it right, Jesus was the perfect preacher. He was the perfect pastor. He was the perfect friend. And he still had a Judas. He still had a Peter that denied him 3 times. This guy woke the dead. Everyone he prayed for got healed. The guy never did a single thing wrong, made a single sin. But still, Peter said, I don't know that guy. He turned his back on him and denied him 3 times. Judas betrayed him and stabbed him in the back. I don't care how perfect are, if you walk long enough with people, somebody will stab you in the back and it doesn't mean it's your fault. Somebody will deny they know you. They'll deny the relationship you have together. They'll walk away from you. If you're in school right now, you understand that, right? The cool kid might talk to you after school, but he ain't sitting at the lunch table with you. It's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because there's something wrong with him. Do not judge yourself on the standard of whether or not you have perfect friendships. You have a perfect God, and that's all you need. okay? And your imperfect relationships around you are not an excuse for you to hide in your hidey hole for the rest of your life and pretend like it's easier or better for you to hide out and camp out from other people, because clearly you're just a mess up and shouldn't be with people. All right, yeah, you might have messed it up. You might be the Peter in the story, okay? You might be that. And Jesus had to deal with those two relationships. So he had these that are faithful, and he had a Judas that no matter what he was going to do was going to betray him. It didn't matter how much he loved him, how much he taught him, how much he showed him. Judas was going to betray him. But on the other hand, he had a Peter. Some of us have people that are going to betray us no matter what, and some of us have Peters in life that are going to mess up, make a mistake, that if we will have love, grace, and mercy, will come back around and will actually make our legacy bigger than how we left it. Peter messed up, but he realized it. He repented, and Jesus forgave him and made him the rock, right? Made them the cornerstone. He helped build the church, okay? He helped build the church, right? And so, and we see that again repeated with Paul. Paul didn't walk with Jesus, but he was a sinner, and Jesus met him and said, come on. Man, I learned from Peter. Peter was fallen too, and I gave him an opportunity, and he's going to change the world. How about you, Paul? And so the model became, it's okay to make a mistake. We have to have enough grace in our relationships to realize when people need a second chance, and enough God in our life and enough roots in our life to hold through the storms when people stab us in the back that are never going to use the second chance. Not everyone's going to use the second chance, but we should always have it available, right? Not everyone's going to use it. There are Judases in your life, okay? And there are just sometimes, and here's the thing. I don't know if you've been like this, but let me give you an example. So we're talking about seeds and we're talking about plants and roots. I went out in the back of my land a couple of months ago, and I noticed these really cool plants. Don't put them up yet. But I noticed these really cool plants, and they had these really big leaves, and I thought, that doesn't look like a weed. That looks like something else. That doesn't look like just random weeds when I didn't mow, okay? And I'm like, what is that? And so I just waited. It had pretty flowers, and I'm like, that could be squash. That could be zucchini. And so as it grew, this is what grew on it. Show that picture. Does anybody know what that is? What? You say pumpkin? You say what? Any other? Acorn, squash. We got 3. Okay, how many say pumpkin? We're gonna take a poll. They're usually orange, I think. I don't know how they start though. So how many guys say watermelon? Anybody? How many of you guys say acorn squash? Okay. Anybody think something else? Last chance. You have to say it. Did someone say corn? Okay. I was so excited because my favorite fruit in the whole world is watermelon. So I'm seeing these and I'm like, I'm so excited. I'm going to have watermelon. I'm just going to eat so much watermelon, right? And I'm so excited. And it just did. It stayed that size, and it wouldn't grow, and it wouldn't grow. And I'm like, oh, what is wrong with this thing? So I took it inside, and I said, maybe there's just too much, and you're supposed to thin it out so they get bigger. And I'm like, oh, that'll preach right there. Sometimes you got to thin it out to grow, right? You know, sometimes the weeds and too many, trying to raise up too many at once doesn't allow you to actually grow anything, okay? So if you're trying to teach too many people at once, if you're thinning yourself out, you're actually reducing the size of the fruit you can produce in your life, all right? But then that didn't work either, so I'm like, never mind that analogy. And so it didn't grow, and so finally I cut one open, and it was yellow, and I've seen yellow watermelon, so I'm like, okay, so I licked it, right? You got to check, right? I did the sniff test first, right? And so I licked it, right? That's just for Chas because she's going. I licked it, and it was like, ooh, right? So I made the bitter face. Sour Patch Kids, but they're not sweet at the end. There is no sweet. And I'm like, that's gross. So I started doing a little research. It's called a buffalo gourd. So if you said gourd, yeah. So it's a buffalo gourd. It doesn't look like a buffalo, and it is definitely not the size of a buffalo. Okay? A buffalo gourd. Do you know what it's good for? Yeah, really nothing. Really nothing. Nothing. It's good for running over with my mower, okay? And it actually can be poisonous if you eat too much of it. So it's like, oh, that's fantastic, right? Right? Of course, I licked it, right? And oh, the Lord said I will not die of poison accidentally. Okay? I didn't die. It didn't die. Yeah, that's why I was sick. No. So, yeah, no, because I ate the mushrooms and the gourd from my yard. That was not a good idea. So, apparently, there's a lot of things on my land trying to kill me, right? Just like the enemy in your life. Oh, okay. So this didn't really work out. And what I realized is that sometimes in life, there is just no way for you to know until you open it up and find out. There is no way for you to know if what's inside is sweet and is going to be a fruit, or if what's inside is poisonous. On the outside, it looked edible. And there are going to be people in your life that as much as you know the Holy Spirit, as much as you ask God about, and as much as you are a good, wonderful Christian person, there are going to be people that walk in your life and you say, yes, this is a good relationship. I feel it. And you're going to get to the relationship, you're going to cut it open and realize there's poison inside. And there's going to be people that get cut off the vine of your life. Not because there's anything wrong with your vine, because that's just the way it works. That's just what it is. And sometimes you never know until you open it up and find out. So don't be afraid to get into a relationship because, well, I don't know what the fruit is inside. I don't know what's inside of this, and I don't know where this is going to end. So what? And stop getting in such a funk because somebody in your life, your relationship, didn't work out. So now you want to cut off all the other good fruit. You want to dig up the garden despite the weed. And that is not the way you root. That's a good word right there. There's going to be plenty of buffalo gourds in your for watermelons. Okay? So let me recap. So just because a friend betrays you doesn't give you the emotional authority to hide away and close yourself off. It doesn't give you the right to reject your church, your friends, and your calling. What if Jesus had followed that model? What if Jesus had followed the model? What that meant for him? Everyone goes through those things. Jesus understood how difficult relationships was. And if he was the standard for how we live our lives, then we can't put down our cross and follow our own will and use that as an excuse anymore. Well, no one cares for me. Or they don't deserve it after what they've done. Come on, we've all said that. Nobody cares about me. They don't deserve it. You have your cross to bear. You have your hill to climb. You have your race to run. Those are what your life is about if you want to make an impact in your life. And allowing broken relationships to stop you is not a recipe for success. Okay, so what if Jesus had followed that model? So what if Jesus decided, because he had a Judas and a Peter who denied him and betrayed him, that he should just shut himself off and not finish his race and use his excuse to walk away from the church or walk away from his relationships or walk away from the other people he cared about to save his own for self-preservation. Okay, Jesus would have never gone to the cross, and we wouldn't have forgiveness today. We wouldn't have redemption today for that. And you know what? Jesus learned something very, very clearly. If he had never gone to that cross, he would have never been walking on that road and had a cross that was too heavy for him to bear alone, and had a complete stranger come out of the crowd and what? Carry his cross, right? So somebody else, after these relationships were falling apart, somebody else came out of the woodwork and started carrying his cross for him. And then what happens is he gets to the hill, he gets up on the hill, and he's hanging there in the worst moment of his life, and somebody says, you know what, God? You know what, Lord? I'm going to follow you. Let's go to paradise. Remember me when you get to your kingdom. I'll follow you. So in a moment, right after he was betrayed, and he could have been in a moment going, what am I doing? I'm messing it up. I don't know what I'm doing. Right in the moment of your despair, where you think you're falling apart, you think your life is having no impact, and everyone's leaving you left and right then somebody hanging on their cross decides that you're the salvation, and you impact their life in your moment of despair. All right? Your depression can still be used by God. Put it past yourself and start walking where you're called. Never mind what you're going through. You can still have an impact carrying a cross or dying on one. He still found people to minister to. And those people, he never would have found out that other people were faithful and saw what his life was like and saw who he was and decided that he was worth following if he would have stopped at the betrayal. And so we need to be in right relationship with each other. At the very moment you feel the most alone, the most betrayed, the most isolated, the most weak, and the most mocked, that's the moment, if you just keep going, caring about other people and keeping the course, walk the walk, that's when you start to see that the seed of godly relationships that rooted in faithfulness to keep loving will start to bloom. That's when it starts to bloom. After you walk the walk when it's tough. After it's hard to push those roots out. When you're rooted in faithfulness, that's when you start to bloom. Whether the failure is theirs or yours. You start to bloom after a failure. You may have had a failure. You may be the Peter of the story today. You may be the Judas of the story today. And you might use that as an excuse. It's not that they quit on me, I quit on them. So I'm not worthy to be anybody's friend. That is a lie from hell. What you did wasn't worthy. So start rooting so that you're worthy. Rebuild, reroot, regrow. Start growing new fruit. You may be chopped down, but you can sprout it out again. You can grow up from a stump of a person into something that bears fruit again. Start again. Maybe you've hurt people so bad you're never going to be in a relationship again. Maybe maybe you're the Judas and you're never going to get that second chance. Maybe that's the case. But as long as you're alive, you can do it right the next time with somebody. Because otherwise your life will never have fruit. Satan doesn't want to ruin your relationship. Do you know that's not his goal? His goal isn't to break that one relationship. His goal is to break you. His goal is to break your life. His goal is to rob you of your calling, your purpose, and the plan God has on your life. And so if he can break you through that relationship, if he can take and break your relationship and then systematically get you to hide away and break everything else down in your life, his goal is to rob you of your calling and hurt God through it. His goal is to wound the Father, and if you allow that relationship, whether you're the bad guy or the good guy, to determine that you stop right there, you let the enemy win because he's going to rob the rest of your life. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of him taking my ground. I'm tired of him taking my soil. I'm tired of him planting his weeds in my garden and stealing my fruit. And it stops right now. And I'm going to partner with some people because the weeds in your life may be too much to root up yourself. But if you partner with some people, you can rip them up a whole lot easier. And you can clean up your garden and it can be fruitful and it can multiply because you have the aid of your brothers and your sisters in Christ. Whoo! Man, I feel the Holy Spirit right now. Thousands showed up for Jesus, but 120 stayed and remained. 12 that his life impacted so deep that they changed the whole world. In a small group of people is where your life will hold you when you're shaken. It's where you can hold others when they're shaken. In a small group of people. Not this. You can't do it here. I love you. I want to preach to you. I'm going to keep doing it. But if this is all, you're going to get uprooted. I promise. You're going to get shaken, and I'm going to hear about it later after your world's already fallen apart. And you say, and I say, what happened? Well, who'd you talk to about it? I don't have anyone. I'm all alone. But you're here every Sunday. Yeah, well, you're the only one that talks to me, and I don't get to talk back, except for the mouthy ones. Except for the mouthy ones. And you hear them right now. It's the small group in your life that will hold you together. I don't know which day will hold triumph or tragedy for you. Listen to me. I don't know which day will hold triumph or tragedy for you. But I do know that it will be the close relationships you form here, that can celebrate with you in the triumph and will hold you together in the tragedy. Your relationship to others matters to God, so it should matter to you. So it's time to jump up and become a disciple and find your family group. Okay? To find your 12. Find your tribe. To find your family group, your small group, the people that you can lean on. You know, the people that know all your junk so much and still let you show up? Right? Right? Any of you guys know my junk? Nope. Right? One person. Right? One person knows all the stupid stuff I did as a kid. Right? Because he was there. I tell myself all the time. I don't tell you the stuff that'll make you leave, though. Just kidding. Your small group matters. And so let me say this, and we're going to close, okay? Your small group matters. So I'm going to ask the small group people to go in the back. If we could get the rear light turned on, my small group leaders, I'm going to have you go to the back. And if we could get the walk-in light turned on in the hall closet, please, by somebody that knows where that switch is, the W, and get that turned on. Here's what we're going to do. Today is Small Group Sunday. Today we're going to launch something. We're going to take you to the next level in discipleship. Are you Let me ask you something. When the story of your life is read, do you want it to be said that you were one of the people that heard Jesus preach, one of the 5,000, or do you want to say you were a disciple of his? Do you want to say you were one of 120? Do you want to be a number, or do you want to be named? Do you want God to know your name or your number? So you need to decide right now, are you going to get into a relationship? Are you going to be somebody's 12?